obviously, we talked about supply chain issues. We're going to talk about some constraints, what's going on that's impacting these. And so, as everyone knows, I mean, first and foremost, we very much appreciate the cooperation with Iowa Port. As you all know, MPPC handles the policy issue. Hopefully, everyone here is members, SIP side of the equation. I'm going to spend most of my time here today. I mean, obviously, many of the times we're talking about issues relating to legislation, regulatory, so forth. But today, I'm going to talk about what we call freedom to operate. That is protecting your livelihood of challenges that's going on. So, what of that's by what I refer to as the activist groups that's out there. Everyone understands there are a host of those, being those Mercy for Animals, DXE, and HSUS. And so I think I was going to start off before we get into specifics of the current topic today about Prop 12 is, even especially here in Iowa, we're dealing with it. But if we step back about 10 years and look like 2012, we really started this. We had a lot of undercover videos that took place and brought a lot of attention to things. As a net result of that, we really hardened our overall operations, and we're much better as a result of it. We begin to see attacks on specific production practices. Those things that maybe a lot of people outside of business and agriculture really don't understand. They love our product, but they just don't really know how we produce it. So we begin to see attacks on things such as, what we're talking about today, gestation stalls. That became a big issue. Also, euthanasia, blunt force trauma that we used to use became a hot topic. But gestation stalls for our industry is the real hot topic, that's been in the news, focused on that. That move to attack on the brands, that is putting pressure on companies that buy our products, specifically in this case, whether it be the McDonald's, the Walmarts, so forth, that again, those individuals that back in 2012 made a mandate that said, we're going to, in 2022, we're going to have all of our support come from farms that no longer use gestation stalls, for example. Obviously, those individuals who made those announcements and all that are no longer with the companies. Most of the people today that I deal with, I spend most of my time working with companies such as Walmart and McDonald's and others. They have no idea why, who, how those announcements were made. They're just having to deal with it. We're also beginning to see pressure on investor groups. And investor groups are those financial institutions that help to loan money to these companies. And I'm talking here the BlackRocks, the Morgan Stanleys, the Wells Fargo, and that. Just like in the case of Joe talking to you about programs and financial risk management tools, these financial institutions that are loaning money are looking at all this stuff. And so they're asking these companies, what do you have in place to help assure that you're not dealing with some negative public backlash that would create, some news. An example of that, in an ancillary way, here lately, this past week, I've been dealing with Carl Icahn in the news and the attack on McDonald's and where they stand today and with their announcement on South Housing, for example. And today we've also moved into the sustainability and corporate social responsibility. So I'm going to skip through some of this to get to the real meat of the matter. Today we're here to talk about South Housing. Historically, I'm old enough, been around long enough in my career that I spent my early part of my career moving producers from outside lots and so forth into confinement into the standard operations that we ride today. And the debate became about individual housing versus what we refer to as group housing. Obviously, there's lots of ways, as you all know, in which we can raise and produce sows today. Whether it's many of the new operations going in today, that's group housing, have ESF, electronic sow feeding, and larger groups, but we have all kinds of systems that are out there in regards to today with Prop 12 coming in. One of the benefits of one type of system, in group housing, is what we call free access stalls, where it gives the benefit of both the stall and the group housing. The point of all this is there are lots of ways in which we can produce and raise animals in confinement, most of which is hinged upon really producer herdsmanship and capability. There's no right way to produce it. The challenge for us and what we're fighting against is this mandate that's being applied to our industry, whether it comes from a state ballot initiative or an activist group or a brand company such as whoever, McDonald's or whoever, telling us about something that is fixed. Most recently, we've had to deal with what we call ballot initiatives. These are activities that took place where voters, consumers in the fall vote on a subject matter that's on the ballot. Usually this is driven by the activist group. Currently we have, I think, 10 states that have ballot initiatives in place. What they say is that the pork produced in that state, have to comply with that. Obviously, many of these states, there's not a significant amount of pork production, so it's not a huge issue. But as you can see in a couple of those areas, especially coming up, for example, in Michigan in 2025, Ohio in 2025, and Michigan recently, those are two states that's had more production. And because of our biosecurity and so forth, we've had a lot of production move to fringe states. So we've had a lot of growth in states where there was historically not many sales because of biosecurity. So it's a big concern. This is a map that's talking about, okay, referendums for state ballot initiatives. The green are those states that's passed them today. As you can see here, the vast majority of states that have a significant amount of production in them have not passed ballot initiatives. That is the point. Luckily, we live in a state here in Iowa, for example, that doesn't have a ballot initiative. All the states in red have that capability. States in blue doesn't. So we don't, and here in Iowa, you don't have to worry about the consumers in Polk County, for example, determining what happens, for the state. But all of these red areas do. And it's not very difficult today with the advent of social media and all this kind of stuff to get enough votes by somebody, because all you have to ask the basic question of, are you concerned about animal welfare? Well, most people would say yes. All right, you get it on the ballot. And then you have a question on the ballot of some case, do you think farmers should take good care of their animals? Yes. It doesn't, they don't ask specific questions of things like, do you think that we should have sows raised in a specific way? They don't know what gestation stalls are. That's how these things get started. My point in all of this is these are really important. So unlike in the days of old, where someone may have had to stand on the street corner or at the grocery store and gain signatures and get all that done in order to get on the ballot, it took a lot of work. Today, through social media and that kind of stuff, it can be done very quickly. And it just points out, this is one other way that we're continuing to fight to make sure that you have our rights are protected. So let's talk about group housing, Jim. This has been a debate that's going on for 10 years. We survey the industry every year, and we've seen a significant amount of growth occur moving into group housing. Just like the discussion that occurred earlier about market reporting and so forth, this is a growing sector, mostly in new construction, because as you all know, it's very difficult remodeling an existing facility. But today we're probably in the range, this is last year's data, we're probably in the range of 38% of the sows in the US today are in some type of group housing. Now, that's not uniform across. I mean, it varies dramatically, especially on the bookends. For example, the Arizona, western states, because of ballot initiative, have all moved in that direction. The eastern seaboard, because of North Carolina, in this case, because of Hatfield and Smithfield, all that product, generally speaking, there. But the vast majority in the middle of the U.S. Still has a whole host of that, which means, generally speaking, 60% of the product today in the U.S. is still raised in conventional methodology of what we would consider to be gestation. Now, it's important as we work through this that we have a uniform description of what group housing is. So if it's becoming a demanded product, customers want it, we need to have some type of group definition of it. And so we do have, in this case, our definition from an industry perspective. And for all of these other ballot initiative states and all the company announcements, what does it mean? It means that once a female is confirmed pregnant, they're moved into a setting where more than one female is housed together, and they can stand up, turn around, lie down on people. The point being is that once confirmed pregnant allows for the use of breeding stalls as we know it, because that way it makes it much more productivity side of the equation. It allows the female to be either individually fed after lactation, bred, heat checked, all of that kind of stuff. Now, the challenge that we have with the current 2 ballot initiative states that are addressed today, most everybody approved Prop 12 in California and Question 3 in Massachusetts. The difference there, both driven by Axis of Agenda, in this case HSUS, has come back in to states that already had a ballot initiative in place and now remodified, putting into place that says now prescriptive in nature for California. 1, that you have to have 24 square feet per animal. 2, they eliminate the use of breeding stalls. So you can only keep a sow in an individual space for a very minute period of time. For example, in this case, you can only have an animal in a confinement area for 6 hours in a 24-hour time frame. So the other part of this is it's what they call an interstate commerce rule, which says now that all the pork sold in that state has to be in compliance, not just the pork that is produced in that state. So let's talk about, so the big difference, I want to make sure that you understand, of all the other ballot issues, why is this important and different? 1 is the fact it becomes prescriptive in nature now. It's the new path, it's the new evolution of the activist groups becoming more prescriptive. Before it was just about group housing, stalls are bad. Now it's about if you move into group housing, you have to do it in a certain way. Now, let's talk about California. Anybody have any idea what % of the U.S. population lives in California? Wild guess, there's no. 10. Close. 14% of the population. Okay. Think about this. 14% of the population would be similar. That is, and they over-index on pork because they have high Hispanic and Latino and Asian population. So that would be about equivalent to the amount of pork that we were selling to China at the height of our business. It's a huge amount of product. Now, so nearly 15% of the pork sold in the U.S. goes to California. So it's a big deal. Now, how many sows do you think commercially are raised in California? Another guess. 8,000 sows. Okay, so 8,000 sows in California. Now, think about 15. We have how many sows in the U.S. today? 6.3 million, something like that. So we're talking about in excess of 600,000 sows worth of product that need to be produced to go to California. You see this imbalance of a state, and that's why this patchwork is so important of states putting mandates on, because what happens in the supply chain. We just heard earlier about the supply chain, okay? Historically, which has been kind of overseen, whatever you want to call it, by 2 things. 1, USDA inspected, generally first and foremost, food safety side of the equation. That's the most important thing. So it didn't really matter when the product was produced in Iowa, it could go anywhere, it could go to Japan, it could go to wherever. But now, as you begin to layer over these patchwork things, it becomes now that says, now you're producing products specifically for a given state. Now, unlike eggs, because everyone has heard of cage-free eggs, that reported that originated in California. Cage-free eggs, the difference between cage-free eggs and pork is cage-free eggs maintains their identity. You produce an egg, it stays together, and you ship it, okay? And pork, California, for example, doesn't buy pork. They buy bacon, they buy chops, they buy ribs, you know, and so, but they don't buy the uniform pig. So, relatively speaking, the challenge of all of that is the fact that says, look, it makes it really difficult for us. And so, for us, the big area that I want to really focus on in this case is these issues of unscientific, you know, mandates that are on here. But is replies to this, but I'm going to get to the point of the all types of product. But the other part of this that requires just ludicrous is all the mandate for record keeping, and most importantly, in the fact that it says all the farms have to be inspected on an annual basis. So if you're supplying product, they mandate you have to have a separate audit and inspection for that. Well, we all know, you know, A, difficulty that's going to be, two, the training of people on that process. And then more importantly, you know, of the process that gets into the whole thing of just, there's no way we can audit annually farms. It's just not feasible in the process. So for us, I mean, our goals are pretty simple in the fact that says, one, we want to provide relief for pushing back on these. We're currently involved in the Supreme Court lawsuit, which, knock on wood, we hope to get the Supreme Court to pick it up, because this is much bigger than California. Because we know next it will be Arizona, it'll be Oregon, it'll be Washington that's next in line. We also know that the next stops are going to be on pain management related to castration. The next stop will be on farrowing stalls, in this case, farrowing crates. They want to eliminate all the things that, you know, are what we consider to be make us be competitive in the environment. So we're pushing in this case for hearing them all. Secondly, we're pushing on the fact of delay. If we can't get the Supreme Court to pick it up, we're pushing to delay for the industry to have, you know, time to respond to this on it. And so we're hopeful in that case. This says February 18th. We're now been pushed back till tomorrow. We'll know Monday if the Supreme Court picks it up. And we were successful in Massachusetts of pushing that back and getting delayed till the end of August on that process and working on that side. But most importantly, in all these cases, it's a big deal because at the end of the day, it requires, you know, and you as producers to be very specific in your overall production system, but more importantly, limits market access. Because now we're not just selling pork, we're selling specific types of pork. So we hope we've been successful today on many of these of pushing back. This one is much bigger that we hope will get into place that kind of pushes back that says no state can mandate on other states to pull through. Most of you guys probably aren't near as interested in Massachusetts. They're not near as big as California. They're small, but it's still important in the big scheme of things. We were successful there in the legislative action and working with the legislators to push back on that side of the equation. But it's not the case. We don't have that option in California.